Hello, everybody. So today I'm going to be asking you or suggesting to you who you should be supporting in the war in Ukraine. Now, this is what we consider to be a geopolitical war. So essentially, this means that who you support and what your view is will depend on where in the world you live. And it doesn't only depend on where you live, but also what your political leanings are in this part of the world. And you can decide for yourself. Ultimately, you're a person, I'm a person, we're all people, and we can just decide for ourselves. But being a geopolitical war, as I suppose almost all wars are, we have a certain view depending on where we are. Now, you might think, oh, objectively, Russia were bad. I'll get to that at the end. But I'm just going to start by saying, geopolitically, this is how you should view it, or this is how your country views it. And it depends really also on whether you support your country. You might not support your own country where you live. Not everyone does. Some people disagree. Now, the first perspective I'm going to look at is Russia's. So, Russia's perspective officially is that this is a war between Russia and NATO. Russia and not only NATO, USA, NATO. That's not really against Ukraine. That's not the Russian perspective. The Russian perspective is this is an existential threat to the entire country of Russia. And if they don't fight it, if they withdraw, Russia will cease to exist. Now, there's a lot of merit to that. There are certain claims by different people throughout USA and broadly throughout NATO and the rest of the world that they aim to destroy Russia once they lose in Ukraine and that they want to split Russia up into individual republics. Some of them want to give part of Russia to other countries such as Poland, Ukraine, whoever else, and even England, USA, other countries like that might want to occupy or even permanently possess parts of Russia. And so there is a lot of merit to that. Now, it's not saying that's absolutely factual, but that's certainly the Russian view. So if you have the Russian view and you believe that that's true, and you believe that you don't want that to happen, you want to continue to live independently, or you want to continue to live the way you have been as part of Russia, you should support the war continuing and you should support Russia. Now, of course, if you're a Russian and now Vladimir Putin has about, I believe, somewhere around 70, 80, maybe even up to 90% of support, but there are people that oppose him. Now, um, Navalny, I think his name was, had about 5% support before he unfortunately died in prison. And the people that supported Navalny would have opposed the war. And there are people within Russia who would oppose the war and oppose Putin. Now, these people might have to be a bit quiet about it, but they might not like the war continuing, or they might want Russia to withdraw, even if it means the end of Russia, or they might want them to withdraw and not believing that anything will happen if they withdraw. They might also support it continuing and support Ukraine. So there are a few views, but most people in Russia will support the war. And now I know people in the West think that's not very genuine, that they're forced into it. I've seen reports that suggest that that's actually the genuine view. But if it is what you're forced to do, that even makes it even more that you should go that way. Because if your life is going to end if you don't support this war, you'd better support the war. Then we go to the Ukrainian side. So it's actually more than two sides, but I'm just going to go straight to the Ukrainian side. So the Ukrainian side is a little bit more complicated than Russia. So Ukraine actually has a bit of a split east to west. Now, it's not neatly exactly in half. It's actually more sort of north and east is one side. Sorry, north and west is one side, and south and east is the other. So, in other words, Crimea and the what we call eastern Ukraine, especially the Donetsk, is one side. Kiev and the western side, including Lviv, is another side. So you've got sort of that split, sort of a bit diagonal, and that half there is on one side, that half there is on another. And again, it's not quite so easy. So if you're on the side that's east and south, then you are probably going to be maybe not completely on Russia's side, but Russian leaning. You might well like Ukraine, but you probably don't like Ukraine's anti-Russian policies. You probably want to keep a Russian Orthodox Church. You probably want to keep being able to speak the Russian language. You probably want to have a pro-Russian political party being at least able to be voted for, since that's pretty much every president from 1991 to 2014 was pro-Russia. Well, every president was. I shouldn't say pretty much. It was every, and most of the candidates were. So 97% of the people that were voted for were pro-Russian candidates. So people on that side don't necessarily want to become a part of Russia, but given a choice of an anti-Russian Ukraine or Russia, they would prefer to be in Russia. So if that's your part of Ukraine, you're in Donetsk, you're in Luhansk, and you're like the most people in that side, you will probably say, well, Ukraine, if you guys become friendly with Russia, we're happy to stay in Ukraine. But if you're not friendly with Russia, well, we're going to fight against you and we're going to go to Russia. So, and you'll probably be a bit perplexed because you did like the idea of being a separate country from Russia. This was a nice idea, the idea that you could be your own country. But you'd also realize that in order to do that, you need to be supportive of Russia. And the current government and all the governments since the Maidan Revolution in 2014 have been opposed to Russia and increasingly opposed, and you feel suppressed. You feel like your voice isn't being heard, and you either want to support Russia's invasion or else you want to just go to Russia. And you might just leave Ukraine um, and go live somewhere else and then say, oh, you hate the war, not really suggest which side you're on. And you'd also probably be afraid of the Ukrainian army, who may well recruit you, force you to go in the front lines and die to Russian attacks. And you probably also know that you're probably going to be strung up and killed and made it look like it's a war crime by Russia against you, even though the people stringing you up were probably the Ukrainians that hate Russia. And it's a bit nerve-wracking. Now, of course, if you're on that side and you hate Russia, then you'll obviously go to the Ukrainian side. So that's one side that is a little bit complicated. Now, it's not as complicated if you're in, let's say, Crimea. Almost everyone in Crimea wants to support Russia. They believe they're part of Russia. They consider themselves to be part of Russia legally. Depends on which side you're talking about, but it's a bit more clear cut there. And in Donetsk and Luhansk, they've been fairly clear cut of at least supporting Russia since 2014, and it does vary a little bit, but yeah, that's the side there. Now, if you're now talking about the west and north of Ukraine, now I suppose I should do the capital first. So Kiev, fiercely independent. That's the capital city and the capital oblast. You guys, even if you are pro-Russia, you don't want Russia to be involved in your affairs, but you probably don't want USA either. But you'd rather USA than Russia. Now, if you're in western and northern Ukraine, you're probably on the Polish side, and you may well be you might have Polish heritage. You might say, well, I'd be happy to go back to Polish control. We might say, well, if we can't have Polish control, may as well have American control. And that's probably your viewpoint. And you're probably saying, well, I don't want Russia in here. Russia is not my people. My people are Polish. I might even be happy to go back to Poland and and you can probably see that there is a bit of a push. Russia, Poland could well be a situation where half of Ukraine goes to Russia, half goes to Poland, and people could be relatively happy with that. Now, the Polish side could be a bit of a Polish American side, and yeah, but the battle lines would be more like that. And that would be not a frozen conflict, but just simple lines of who belongs to who and whether you call this side Western Ukraine, you call that side, oh sorry, this side Eastern Ukraine, that side Western Ukraine, whatever you want to call it, or Russian Ukraine and Polish Ukraine, you know, whatever, however they want to do it, you're going to have very different views from each other. Now, in the capital city, or you're on Western Ukraine or Northern Ukraine, you're going to have very different views to the other side. Your views are going to be quite a lot more anti-Russian, quite a lot more welcoming of Americans and of Europe as a whole, and very different views. Of course, there are some people in that group that are pro-Russian. That it's not like there's none there and they're all there or anything like that. So they are going to have different views. Now, I do think that it is worth mentioning that a different group um, and different people have different views of how many there are. But Nazism is legal in Ukraine, more than it is in any other country in the world, and that needs to be acknowledged as a separate demographic. Now, people will say, well, they're neo-Nazis, they're not real Nazis. They do have a continuous connection to the actual Nazis during World War II and before. So these people, they call themselves Nazis. I don't like the term neo-Nazis. I just call them Nazis. They self-identify as Nazis. Now, this group is anywhere up to 5 to 10% of the population. There's some people say 8, 7. It's mostly on the west, the north and west sides. So that half, the anti-Russian half. Now, these people will be very extremist, and some people call them ultra nationalists, or however you want to describe it. They use different terms to say they're not Nazis, but they are Nazis. But we don't want to use that word Nazi because it has certain connotations, even though they call themselves Nazis and they love that connotation. Some people call them Banderites because of the guy called Stepan Banderas, an Austrian Nazi who was very important in Ukraine. He convinced the Ukrainians to fight for Nazi Germany against Soviet Union during World War II. And so his followers are called Banderites. Now, he's been dead for a long time, but that's what they call them. And then you've got the Azovs, as they call them, which is the Azov Battalion, which is actually from eastern Ukraine. So the side that really pro-Russia, but this little group are anti-Russia. And they also self-identify as Nazis, and there's Svoboda, and there's other groups as well. And so these groups together, there's not just one group of Nazis, there's several groups. But as a group, they hate Russians so much that even if they weren't at war, they would kill them all. Um, so yeah, and they think that Ukraine, that's all that matters. They don't even care. They don't like Americans either. They will take their money, take their guns, and they're extremely extremist. Now that's very different to the views of the average Ukrainian. Even the Western Ukrainians, even the Northern Ukrainians, they're very different. And so that's a different group there. Then you have the Americans. Now you got Americans that you got the Republicans, you got the Democrats, you got the people that don't give a shit, and you got the people that are just America first. Then you got immigrants and blah 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 blah. So the general Democrat position, if you're on the Democrat side, you're on the left side of politics, is that we've got to support the war, support Ukraine, no matter what, and you're not actually aware of most of this stuff. The Republican view is Ukraine's a bunch of money launderers. They're after all our money. They're horrible. We oppose the war because it's just a money laundering operation. It's a Republican view. Now, I could argue they're both wrong, but so be it. That's the side that you've got to have, and then there's the America First ones, which tend to be the Republican view in this version, in this occasion. And then, of course, if you don't give a shit, you probably don't want to see the war continue because it's hurting America and it's taking all the money and all that sort of stuff. So you really have a bit of a minority view. You're not just talking Democrats and Republicans. Republicans plus America First plus don't give a shit are all against funding the war. Plus, also, you've got the peace lovers, there's bunches of them. And then you just have the Democrats that are not peace lovers. And a lot of Democrats are hippies and they are people that want peace, make love, not war. And they find themselves conflicted because their political party says we want war, and yet their ideology says they don't want war. So you actually do find some people that normally wouldn't want war that do support this war, and you have others that say they support the war but actually don't want the war. But it's a bit conflicting. Now, then we go to Europeans. Now, this varies European country to country. So, if we're talking about Poland, for example, this is a unique situation in Europe. Now, Poland actually has legitimate claim to probably close to half of Ukraine as being a part of Poland. They lost it during World War II. So, for people that may not be aware or may have forgotten, during World War II, the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany split Poland in half, and they took half each. They were on the same side at that point, and then Nazi Germany attacked Soviet Union. So we know what happened then. Then Soviet Union eventually won, but the Polish half, oh sorry, the German half of Poland went back to becoming Poland, and that's the Poland we have today. But the Soviet Union half didn't, stayed in the Soviet Union, and that part became half of Ukraine, or close to half of Ukraine. So it's a bit strange because Poland won the war. Well, they were on the same side of the Soviet Union in the end, but they lost land. You're not supposed to lose land when you win a war. So they have a legitimate reason to ask that back. And in fact, if you look at it, kind of if they had that land now, this would be kind of the war between Russia versus Poland and changes the nature of the war. And not only that, but Vladimir Putin has essentially said, well, Poland, you can have that land, you can have Western Ukraine, it'd make it a lot easier for us. We'll have Eastern Ukraine, you can have West. And this is the thing, Poland don't like Russia. They also don't like Ukraine. There was a long time Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth did control Ukraine, or what is now Ukraine. And they do want that land back, and they probably want even a bit more. And yeah, they're a NATO country officially, but they were in the Warsaw Pact, and they were on the same side of the Soviet Union until 1991, and probably shouldn't really be in NATO. Um, I think there's a few issues with Poland being a part of NATO, but anyway, um, there is every chance that Poland could backstab NATO and just take part of Ukraine for themselves. They could easily get into a deal with Russia where Russia says, look, guys, we could either invade you, or how about you help us to take Ukraine? And you find Poland getting Russian money, Russian troops joining them and taking Western Ukraine, and that becomes Polish Ukraine. That could easily happen. Easy. Not. This is not a theoretical. This is a very realistic scenario. Now we're not there yet. We're also not very far off it. Now the Baltic states also don't like Russia. Now, this is Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia. They also want a bit more land than they've got. They could easily form a deal with Russia where they get little bits of Ukraine for themselves. Not large amounts, but just little bits, just enough, just bits that sort of close to them. And they could have a deal with Poland, and you could find all four of them countries actually ally up with Russia and backstab Ukraine. And now I know they're all part of NATO now somehow or other. This is amazing, but yeah, they do have lots of historical ties with Russia. No, they don't trust Russia. They don't like Russia, but they could do a transactional deal, and that could favour Russia. And in fact, if America don't do a deal fairly soon, that could be an eventuality. Um, and I'm sure Russia are aware of it. No doubt that they're aware of it. So if you're in those countries, you might be a bit confused. You might be very careful with what you say because you could end up on the same side as Russia. Germany, here's another one. Germany have become closer with Russia since the fall of the Soviet Union, and they're now pretty close friends. Have a lot of economic ties. There was a pipeline that was feeding their energy usage. Now Americans, we know it was Americans, it wasn't Russia. They blew up the Nord Stream pipeline to force Germany to not be neutral because Germany wanted to be neutral with this war, and it forced Germany to take the same side as America. They don't want to be, and it wouldn't be difficult for Germany to flip. Um, you've got to have a deal where that pipeline Nord Stream 2 goes back up. Germany get all their money, they get all their gas, they get all their electricity needs met, and they get that, and in return, they flip sides, or at least gone neutral. I don't think that they would actually go all the way to supporting Russia, but be neutral. And you got Hungary, pretty much already wants to be neutral, and Austria, pretty. I mean, if you got Germany and Hungary on the side of them, then you're pretty much going to have Austria flipped as well, or at least becoming neutral. And that then leaves you with just a few little countries that are sort of west of Germany, west of that little block. So you could have the whole of Eastern Europe being either on Russia's side or neutral. And that sort of your views could be a bit confused if you're in these countries. France hates Russia. France is not going to support Russia. And Belgium's not going to support Russia. Um, United Kingdom is definitely not going to support Russia. United Kingdom is probably the most against Russia out of all of them. So if you're in United Kingdom, you don't even care if USA sides with Russia. You're not. You're a bit against them. You don't care. You'll go to war with them. But if you're in the United Kingdom, you know that you used to be the biggest country in the world. It wasn't that long ago. It was for a very long time. And you want to get that back. And at the moment, you're piggybacking on USA. You have been for a while now. By a while, I mean 50 years. Just seeing you grow up to be currently the fourth strongest country in the world. Pretty big. You're close to Russia. With American backing, you could take Russia. Without American backing, you can defend yourself from Russia, maybe, as long as they don't use nukes. But you're a bit nervous. You don't like Russia, but you might be forced by America to do something else. Don't really want to oppose America. If you're friends, you're probably going to say you don't. Yeah, you're in France. You're in England. You're in United Kingdom. You're a bit unsure. You're in Belgium. You're tiny. You're doing what other people want you to do. You're in Scandinavia. Yeah, yeah, you're in NATO now. Yeah, you're probably going to stay out of it. So it's not obvious. You're in Canada. You're going, well, America wants to take us over now. We're pretty much against America now, suddenly. Yeah. You're in Australia. You're going, we're forced to do what America wants, but we really don't like America. We'd rather stay out of it. And your views are kind of different depending on where in the world you are. Now, that's enough of the geopolitics stuff. Done enough talking about that. It's all a bit, nah, nah. Let's now be real. Let's talk about what you should think, really, through all the different propaganda. You've got through all your different political bullshit. You're now going, what should I really think? What's really important? Are you loyal to your country, to USA, to Ukraine, to Russia, or are you loyal to the human race? Do you want humanity to continue? Probably do. You're not at war. You're sitting on your couch like me or somewhere else. You probably don't want to have the whole world blow up. A lot of people have talked about going to war with Russia as poking the bear. And this bear now has 6,000 nuclear weapons. It was bad enough before they had that. Poking the bear, it could lead to a nuclear war. It could lead to destruction of the human race. It could lead to World War III. Even if you don't lead to all those terrible things, it could lead to bad stuff. You probably really don't want that to happen. So you probably want this war to end. Now, no, you don't really want whatever outcomes are going to happen, but in the end, it's probably secondary to just ending the war however you can. Now, you want to have it end in the terms that are the best for you or for whoever you support more as well as you can. But in the end, you probably realistically know Russia's won. In fact, you realise that the only reason you ever thought that Russia might not win is because you believe pretty obvious propaganda and you feel stupid about it now. Because it was pretty obvious. Let's be honest, this propaganda from the start was pretty obviously propaganda. And if you fell for it, you need to go back to school. This wasn't the smartest propaganda in the world. This wasn't stuff that, oh, well, very difficult to work it out. No. This was pretty obvious. This was stuff that, 6-year-olds could have figured out. And you fell for it. And you feel bad now. You're going to feel worse later when it's becoming more and more obvious. You go, this war was really all about America trying to become stronger, trying to avoid a Russian-Chinese alliance, trying to make Russia look bad. Trying to kill Russians and Russian allies because realistically, Ukraine are an ally of Russia more than anything. They have been historically, been a part of Russia. And Americans are gleeful because they're having two sides killing each other. That realistically, throughout most of history, have been on the same side. And you know that Ukraine's either going to be part of Russia or supportive of Russia. Well, unless part of it goes to Poland, but even then, if Poland take that part of Ukraine, Poland's probably going to be friends with Russia. So either way, both sides are going to end up on the same side. once the war ends or soon after the war ends. They're not going to be permanent enemies. They're not going to be long-term enemies. They're going to go back to their state of being on the same side. And that's a problem. Because once this war ends, all this equipment you've been giving is going to go to Russia or to Russia's friends, which Ukraine will be. And that's a problem. I mean, you know that happened in Afghanistan. Taliban ended up with all of America's equipment. Really a good idea. And you want this war to end. And you need this war to end. And you don't want Russia to take too much, but there's not really much you can do about that. So you want to be supporting anybody who's supporting peace, and pretty much that's Trump. If your leaders are opposing it, you probably don't like your leaders. This coalition of the willing and all this, you're probably going, guys, back off. You probably want to have, oh, look, you might not want Zelensky to be killed, just have him go somewhere safe. Take all of his friends and everything. Hold elections in Ukraine so that they elect whoever they want to elect. And remove all the bans of all the political parties, because really that's pretty awful. Let whichever people they want to vote for be voted for, whether they're pro-Russian parties or anti-Russian parties or whatever they are. Remove all the bans. Well, probably should ban Nazism, but they don't even ban Nazism, so let's just have more. Have all the people that they want to vote for. Let it be an actual democracy, not just a pretend one. And then they vote for whoever they like. You involve the United Nations, you can have peacekeepers there, making sure the elections are fair. Then you do that. And once you have them, then you sort everything out. And there's still some leaders around the world that want this war to continue. And I don't think that's a good thing. If it continues and it's a quick thing, fine. Now you've got to finish everything up. But yeah, it's like this war, if it was a week-long war, fine. Who cares? I mean, it happened right at the end of COVID-19. It was right after the end of the pandemic. It was pretty awful. And I mean, when it started, I was like, oh, you guys are all going to be infecting each other. But yeah, that didn't seem to be an issue after a while. But yeah, the war itself, bit of a problem. Yeah. So yeah, look, in the end, it is up to you who you want to support, you know. But I sort of think, for the most part, for most of us, I think the sensible thing to do is to not have a war. Well, not at all, really, unless it's really seriously important. But not to have a war that risks destroying the world, destroying all humans, or killing way too many people, and orchestrating a war in which two people that are really on the same side kill each other in large numbers. It's not something I feel happy about. I mean, it's the numbers, it depends on who you ask, but certainly over 100,000, possibly over, you know, 500,000. It's a lot of people that have died. And yeah, it's not great. It's not something that we should be celebrating. I know some people support it because they blame it all on Russia and they say, well, we have to do that. You don't. I'll just say that. Um, yeah, it's very sad. I think that two groups of people who historically adore each other have been manipulated into fighting each other. I find that very sad. I don't think that Putin has been smart in falling for that. I think he's been quite stupid. I don't think he should have invaded. I think he was manipulated by Joe Biden to invade, and he fell for it. And I think he was not very smart in falling for that. I think Volodymyr Zelensky should have surrendered straight away. And I think he was manipulated into not surrendering. And I think that both sides have been rather stupid. So that's my view. of that. And I think there's been a lot of mistakes on both sides. And as for Biden, and you might say, oh, well, he's the puppet master, he's been the smart one. I don't think this has helped America. So I see stupidity all around. And that might seem a bit arrogant of me, but there's been some big mistakes from every side. And maybe that's the case for all wars. But yeah, I don't think it's a war that should have happened, or should be continuing, or should be continuing any longer. And I'd love it to be ending as soon as possible. I feel nervous with it on. I don't want it to continue at all. Yeah. That's all I have to say about that. Look, you guys support whatever you want. That's your business. Believe whatever you want. It's a human right. And if your country is doing something you don't agree with, and it's along the line that it might destroy your life on Earth, if you're in a democracy, as you almost certainly are, you can vote against that. You don't need to protest. You don't need to kill people. You can just, when it comes time to vote, vote the other way. Vote for the side that doesn't want to do something you disagree with. And if you know we're near an election time, then write letters, protest, go in the streets. But if you do agree with it, go ahead. You can disagree with me. You're allowed. Maybe I'm completely wrong. This is the thing that you can agree or disagree with anything. And I'm certainly not supporting Russia. I don't know any Russians. I've never met a Russian, never been to Russia. Um, I support what's in the best interest of Australia. It's more I don't like America at all than anything. I never liked America. I know a lot of Americans. Not a big fan. Um, I mean, it's people they're fine. I tend to be a bit arrogant, but as a country that push us around, I'm not a big fan of America. But I'm also not like I'm kind of neutral about Russia. I don't care about them. Um, you know, I think from an Australian perspective, it's inevitable that we will eventually be taken over by the USA or China. Russia's not going to bother. And given a choice, I think Australia would be better off being taken over by China. Because China treat us a lot better. They're a lot more neutral. But I might be wrong. Maybe we'd be better off under American control. We are currently a federated colony of the United Kingdom. We belong to United Kingdom. We're same as Greenland. Well, Greenland belonged to Denmark. We can be bought. America or China could just come in and say, "Hey, England," or "Hey, United Kingdom, here's some money, and we have Australia." Legally, they're allowed to do that. They're also allowed to invade, come in with 1 million troops, and say, "Hey, want to surrender?" And we'd say, "Yeah, sure, we'll surrender." And that's called an annexation, and that's perfectly legal. It's not nice, but it's legal. Well, there's probably some treaties that say it shouldn't be doing it, but they did that to Hawaii. So, yeah, look, you disagree with me, you agree with me, you think I'm an idiot, you think I'm really smart, whatever you want to think, that's your business. I've worked it all out there, cut through the propaganda, I hope, and yeah, yeah, thanks for that. Bye.